Welcome back to the Pleasure Playbook.
Welcome, welcome.
Today is an exciting playbook. We are going to be talking about spicing up things in a long-term relationship. And by far, this is probably one of the biggest things that I deal with in my coaching practice. Steph, would you say that's for
Yeah,
you as well?
100%.
And truly, we're talking about moving from being in the roommate phase with your lover or in moving back into lovers again, right?
Mm.
From that chapter of we live together, we do life together, we're great friends, we co-life together, but we're not fucking good, right?
Mm.
So how do we journey back into to having the eros, to having the sexual energy, having passion and fun and playfulness in our sex lives? So Steph, do you want to kick us off with what is the roommate phase in case
Mm.
anyone is not familiar with that concept?
Yeah. So the roommate phase is that stage that you get to in a relationship where the novelty has worn off. You are way past the honeymoon phase. You're very comfortable around each other. You have a good foundation of a relationship. You are probably best friends. You love each other's company. Things are good. You might be having fun together and feel like things are solid. You have a lot of love. However, you're in a phase or maybe a drought where you've lost that spark, that connection. Maybe it's the romance, but most importantly, it's that eros is gone. That sexuality, that spiciness has gone away. Symptoms of this might be that you look at your partner and you like, I don't really want to have sex with this person. Maybe your desire or you feel like your libido, you're in a lower phase. And that's a whole other conversation. But one reason for this could be that you're in the roommate phase and that's affecting your desire to fuck your partner, basically. You might also be spending a lot of time together and being in each other's space too much, that there's no element of spontaneity or no element of surprise. It's if you just know everything about each other, you know where they are at every minute of the day, that can really eliminate the excitement and the fun and that newness that we once felt. And so, really, it's usually you're having less sex. Maybe you're having no sex with your partner, or you're stuck in routine, boring checklist type sex with your partner, just doing it to do it. But there's no spice, there's no like oomph to it. And this is very common in long term relationships, and it doesn't have to be bad. Let's not create meaning to it. It's a pretty normal phase that most couples will go through at some point, but you don't have to go through it. But if you are experiencing it, it's very normal. Is there anything you wanted to add there? And then I would love to do a personal share.
I think you nailed it. I love that.
Beautiful. Let's just have a little personal share about roommate phase. I've been in the roommate phase many a times before, pre sex queen stuff. So pre all of this work, I didn't know what it was called. I just knew that I didn't really feel like having sex with my partner. I wasn't really tapped into my sexuality. There's that whole beast as well in there. But I love my partner. We were working together, like parenting his kids. I was a stepmom, working a lot in his business. We would go out for dates, but our dates would be consumed with work or talking about the kids or talking about the dogs. We loved each other so deeply and best friends, but there was no separation. There was no spontaneity. We were in our routine. We'd go to the same restaurants. We did the same things. I knew exactly what was coming. There was no element of surprise. And it really made me lose that desire. And I actually had started to lose some physical attraction to my partner as well in that time. And I thought that I was broken. And I thought that meant that the relationship was done, the relationship was over. And I felt so much shame around it because back then, this is 4 or 5 years ago, this wasn't being talked about in the spaces that I was in. I didn't have friends talking about this. I wasn't listening to podcasts talking about this. It's a much more common topic that we hear openly talked about now, sexuality and intimacy in relationships and partnerships. And it was very isolating for me. And this was actually one of the reasons why I got into this work, because I don't want any woman or any couple to feel like their relationship is broken because they're not having sex, because there are a million and one reasons why that could be, and there's no amount of sex that you need to be having. However, I believe that every couple deserves to have beautiful romance and this sexiness and spiciness in their relationship. So my goal is to help women be able to reclaim their own sexuality and show up with the part that they're playing in the eros in the relationship and be ownership of that they can bring into the relationship. So long story short, I have been there in the roommate phase. I have successfully got out of the roommate phase and got back into the most deep, incredible, tantric, expansive, energetic, beautiful sex, like way better than we were ever having before. And it's pretty amazing what we can do when we just acknowledge what's there, don't create meaning around it, doesn't have to mean anything, and then admit we don't know what we don't know and be like, the steps that we can take. And there's some pretty simple steps, in fact, that we can take to really get back into this phase. And what's important is having some polarity. And so really be able to create those opposing forces and energies. So if you're a feminine being, having that partner be in that opposing energy. So there is that opposition where you attract each other in. We can dive more into that, but that's important. And something that I think we get quite into as humans is hoping that our partner is everything for us, being everything and knowing every single detail about one another, which to a certain degree is fine, but that can contribute to the roommate phase. So long story long, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate this is so normal that to come into this phase of your relationship. And I want to be so bold as to say that most couples in the long term monogamous relationships will probably enter a phase where the sexual chemistry, the sexual dynamic between the two of them do shift. And also, that's natural with hormones and nesting and creating a life with someone and then doing life with someone. This is a natural ebb and flow. But on the flip side too is that if we put effort and work into our sex lives, it doesn't have to be that way and it definitely doesn't have to stay that way. So there is so much hope on the other side of maybe feeling these feelings and thinking these ways about your partner or how you're approaching the dynamic right now. It can totally change and shift. And that feels exciting. And I just want to instill that piece of hope for you.
You absolutely can change anything and everything about your sex life if you desire. In the phase that I was in, I think I'd been in a relationship for 4 or 5 years at that point when I realized it was actually second time we're in the roommate phase and completely transformed the relationship. And this was again pre sex coach Steph without any of this knowledge. So it's totally possible if you want it to. So it's exciting. It's fucking scary and very vulnerable. And I think it's harder to have that courage to name your desire in a long-term partnership and say, hey, this is something that I desire. And there's that fear of judgment and rejection. And your partner being like, I know you. Like, why do you want this? So it's really scary and vulnerable when you're in a long-term relationship, like plus a few years, to name that and then to create that space. But it's totally possible. So let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little teaser that we will give you a tool to practice with your partner towards the end of this episode. That if you are dealing with the discomfort in actually having the conversation about what's alive and real in your partnership, we're going to give you a little practice today. So that'll support you. If you're like, yeah, that's where we're at. We can't really talk about sex that openly. We're going to help you.
We are going to help you. Let's get into the 4 things that can support you in spicing up the energy in your long-term relationship and how to get out of the roommate phase. So before we even dive into that, let's really reiterate it's normal. And we invite you into releasing any shame that you potentially might feel around being in that phase. And also release a timeline of the maybe the mental time frame that you've put on it. And just know that ebbs and flows are normal. Depending on what you have on in your life, if you have extreme stress, one or both partners, that's going to affect things, right? So you can't put pressure on the relationship if you're in those phases. However, when it comes to sacred sexuality, sometimes we can actually use sexuality as a tool to help support in those things, but that's another conversation. So let me not go down and open a whole rabbit hole. Let's get into number 1 of the 4 things that can support you in spicing up your relationship. So number 1, and this is really important, and this is specifically for women, for both partners, but really important emphasis for women, is to pour back into yourself. So to take that energy that you are potentially putting on your partner of why we're not having sex. Sometimes as women, what we do is we look for a reason or we look for things to blame or we look for things to control in our partner. And that's a lot of energy that we can spend trying to create the outcome that we want. And the first phase here is let me take that energy and let me pull back a little bit and pour all of that energy back into self first. So, what does this look like, Jenna?
Yeah. I think there's this beautiful analogy of tending to your own garden, which I think is really helpful of seeing if you are working on your own garden, in your front lawn, in your backyard, where you're devoting time to nurture the soil, de-weed it, spend time watering, being there with your attention and presence on your own garden, you're going to have a fruitful, like you're going to
Mm,
have a great harvest. But if you spend time fussing on all of your neighbors' gardens, right? And you're like spending all the time taking their weeds out and you're taking the one from across the street and the person next door to you and you're thinking about watering their gardens first and not even worrying about your own. Like you divide your attention and your assets elsewhere. And then you have less to give to your own garden.
mm,
You have less water, you have less soil maybe in your shed, whatever it be. And I think sometimes those analogies are helpful to see, okay, yeah, it makes sense that I need to focus on what's in front of me. And a lot of the time, the women that I work with too have this pattern of controlling other people around them to feel a sense of control. And I identify with that 100% myself. And so it's like, why don't we not focus so much on the outside and why don't we pour back into ourselves
mm.
and see what that can change, what new fruits we can sow from that? So, yeah, what can this look like? Making sure you're nourished first, right? So, if you are in a pattern of making meals for your partner or making their coffee or doing something that feeds them physically, why don't you first have your own hot beverage or your own making sure your needs are taken care of before then preparing that feast for your partner? Or what about if you have a really busy work week and you have a limited resources to recharge on the weekend? Maybe you set up a night to do your self-care, spend some time writing, reflecting, breathing, watching a great show, spending time with yourself or your partner, just resting.
Mm.
This could look like scheduling your own fitness or your own self-care appointments, like your nail appointment or something that really pours into you ahead of then popping into your calendar, attending, I don't know, their nail appointment.
It can also be pulling back from social commitments. This is something that a lot of women that I work with, high performing women who are constantly on the go and busying themselves, which is not a bad thing, but that can take away from that me time of maybe I go home and do a breath work, or maybe I go home and do some stretching, or I go home and do some movement practice or a little bit of learning, something that's going to pour into self. And it can be pulling back and not saying yes to so many social commitments and not having every evening full. And I'll just share an example of somebody that came to my retreat in January. She was always busy, always doing things for other people. And she thought that staying at home, she lives by herself. She was like, staying at home on a weekend or having time at home, that's so boring. And why would I do that? And now, after coming on my retreat and experiencing the power of this work, she loves having that time alone and she's able to say no to more things. She's not saying yes every time somebody invites her out. Sometimes it's, you know what? I'd rather have the Saturday morning to myself and then we'll do a coffee instead. And it's having those boundaries with your partner, but also in the other areas of your life. Do you need to do dance on a Monday, Pilates on a Tuesday, boxing on a Wednesday, the gym on a Thursday, dinner on a Friday, coffee on a Saturday morning? This is literally the schedule of some of the women that I work with. It's every free hour is packed with some kind of social schedule or activity. And that is great. And there's seasons for that. But don't get so caught up in a season that it becomes your life. And suddenly you realize you don't have any time to pour back into yourself. So I think that's the most important thing. And I think for women who do a lot for other people, maybe you're a mom, or maybe you have a family, or maybe you are the caretaker in your family and there's all these other people that you're responsible for. Yes, that's going to be harder. Sometimes a conversation is necessary of you saying, look, I really need some time to pour back into myself. And I'm going to pre communicate this with you so that you don't feel like I'm doing this as a punishment for you. This is really more about me prioritizing myself. And sometimes having that conversation and say, hey, for the next month, I'm not going to be able to support you in doing X. Maybe there is something else in that case that you need to arrange if that's necessary. If it's something like childcare or whatever, if it's something like making your own coffee, I'm sure that your partner or whoever could make their own coffee for a month. So I think that's important. Communication is important. And there's ways that this can be done healthily. We're not trying to tell you to do this in a toxic way of just, hey, I'm not going to make you coffee anymore because Jenna and Steph said to pull back into myself. Communication is super important here as well.
Yeah. And paying attention to your resentment or your feelings is going to be a good indicator of where you feel like there are those leaks in your energy or your own capacity, and what you're feeling, maybe irritation or resentment or like something kind of crunchy towards, will be a good indicator of, hey, okay, I'm not tending to myself first because I'm sensing this irritability or this resentment when I'm doing XYZ.
Mm,
And a lot of the times there's that quality of resentment that comes up when you feel like you're not receiving to the amount that you're giving.
mm,
Using your emotions as your compass to guide you with that. And then two, it's just that act of putting your oxygen mask on first before other people. And this can look like in your calendar, making little blocks of before you pop everyone else's stuff into it of, hey, where can I, or where can you add the social commitments or the things that are flexible, right? I know having children, and we have the privilege here of speaking from two folks who don't have children,
I have
but
dogs. Excuse
yeah,
me. That's offensive. My dogs are like half children. They're a commitment, but yes, they are
their
not.
commitment.
They're not
Yeah,
human
they create
babies.
yeah. No, you're not bumping off to dance practice or soccer practice or anyway, to side tangent. Scheduling if you have the accessibility or the privilege to do so, of creating little blocks in your Google
Mm,
Cal or whatever you use of your time for yourself, of
mm.
even if it's just rest, right? Of even if it's an hour to sit on the couch, popping those into your calendar so you're not looking at your calendar at the end of the week and being like, "Oh my god, I have nothing in here that."
Yeah, something that I recommend to a lot of women, and this is something that helped me 4 or 5 years ago, was adding into my calendar a goddess hour. So I tried to do this at the end of every day as a working from home, self employed person. It was relatively simple for me to do. I would add in, I think between 5 and 6 p.m. or 6 and 7, goddess hour every day. And that was my time to just be, to pour back into myself. And it wasn't prescribed. I would start by doing a check in of how do I feel at the end of this workday and what do I need? And sometimes it would be lie on the sofa, other times it would be have a hot shower. Sometimes I would feel like having self pleasure practice, or I would force myself to do some breath work 'cause back then it wasn't a regular habit, or do some other kind of practice that's really going to connect me back into myself and fill me up, maybe dancing or movement. I had different practices that I love to do as well. And that was really helpful for me, as this is the shift from the busy day where I get to relax the body, relax the nervous system, get back into that parasympathetic response of calm, calm way of being, and just breathe and start to release the mind, because you really want to be doing that a good few hours before bed. And also, if you are living with somebody, it's nice to have that time to self, to relax, to just be before you then go into partnership, before you are connecting with that person, so that you can be in presence, so you can be in your body and you've released the day, so you're not bringing in potential any stress or chaos maybe from the day that you've experienced into your relationship. It can be as simple as that. So goddess hour is something that I doesn't have to be called that, could just be me time. Keep it simple. Whatever resonates with you, I think is really powerful. Maybe you don't have an hour, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's half an hour. You get to choose. I'd really invite you into seeing where you can fit some of that time and put it in the calendar. And every day is maybe too much. Maybe you'll get to it and you're like, I'm going to keep working. That's fine. But try to create that time for yourself. And something else as well with this is doing the things that you do for your partner or want to do for your partner, but do them for yourself. So taking yourself on a date, maybe taking yourself out for dinner or out on a brunch date. Maybe you go and get yourself some nice lingerie, but it's not for your partner. You're doing it for yourself so that you feel good, and you start to maybe elevate the things that you wear, not from a luxury materialistic standpoint, but so that you can walk about the day knowing I feel really good because I am no longer wearing underwear with holes in it, but I'm wearing this sexy lingerie for myself as I move through the day. Things like that can make a difference to how we feel and how we show up and the person and the identity that we are embodying. External things can really help to support that. Have a little think about what you can do to pour back into yourself. And then we invite you into maybe scheduling some time to create that for yourself.
Yeah. Two things I just wanted to add to this before we move to number two is that having your own hobbies or interests is really helpful for the relationship dynamic. So you have new content to talk about, right? If you ended up taking a pottery class because it's been of interest of yours and something that you've been curious about, and if you go and schedule that in and find the time to create that space for yourself to play in a different medium and a different art, then you'll have a new conversation to speak about with your partner, which is really great. It
Mm,
creates new, fresh content for conversation there. And having your own hobbies and your separateness from your partner does create more chemistry between the two of you,
mm,
which is really one of the big things that I wanted to say. And the second piece was just that everyone needs a different amount of alone time and a different amount that they require to recharge and to come back to themselves. Some people only need a really short amount, and some people need a really large amount of time, much more time to themselves. I'm someone that needs a lot of time to myself to feel well in my relationships. So, not having shame about that, not having guilt, but just communicating that clearly to your partner, your partners that, hey, I actually am someone that needs this amount of time to come back into my own energy, my own self, to pour into myself. And knowing that is a really great, like, pulse to have to keep your relationship strong and well.
very good point. I'm with you. I need a lot of alone time. Me and my dogs gotta have that space. It's hard sometimes having those boundaries and implementing them, but the more that we can connect to self and have that awareness, then we can start to develop the skills to communicate that. Shall we get into number 2?
Let's do it.
So number 2, spicing things up in a long-term relationship, how to get out of that roommate phase is novelty, bringing newness into the relationship. So if you are in that same routine day in, day out, week in, week out, it's going to get a little bit boring, isn't it? Where's the excitement going to come from? So, just like having your own individual hobbies brings that new content, new things that you can share about, you have a little bit of separation. When you are together in the relationship, this is the second step for a reason. And this is before we even get into talking about the bedroom because it's really important. Ultimately, good sex starts outside of the bedroom completely. And most ingredients required are not to do with actual sex. And communication is at the foundation of all of that. But we will talk about that more in number 3. So, how can you bring some newness, some novelty into a relationship? If you were like me back in the day when me and my partner, ex partner, used to go to the same restaurants in the same neighborhood every week for our date night, we were very consistent with dates, but we wouldn't go out and explore different areas. We weren't trying new types of food all the time. We were in a little bit of a rut of where we would do our dog walks, where we would get coffee, where we would eat, the things that we would do. And how can you mix it up? How can you create some novelty like when you were first dating? A great thing for you to think about is when you were first dating your partner, what did you love about that phase? Can you bring that into the relationship now? Maybe a new date spot, a new activity that you can try together. Maybe there is a hotel where you can go and stay for a night, a little staycation somewhere, or something like that to create that novelty.
I love that. If you're doing the same thing all the time, creates such stagnancy in the relationship. Even if it's just changing, if you do a walk together multiple times a week and you take the same course every time you go, same path, like switching that up. Really simple things that don't cost any money you can switch up.
Mhm.
You can even switch up the furniture in your home, right?
Mm.
If your TV and couch is angled one way, like switching things up, like bringing newness into the relationship. And then it can go as far as, yeah, trying new cuisines together, trying a new hobby, a new activity, a new sport together. A bonding over a shared experience is going to be really helpful at bringing a little level of newness, of vibrancy back to the couple.
100%. So the invitation for you is to have a little ponder around what can you bring in that feels right for you. Budget depending, these things don't have to cost money. So have a think about the ways that you can bring that into the relationship. And maybe your partner has ideas as well. And again, it's coming from this place of let's have fun and let's do something we haven't done before and let's add some spice into the relationship and we can get to know each other in a new way. It's from that place, not from the place of I'm bored in the relationship. Why do we always go to the same restaurants, do the same thing? Be very careful in the way that you approach this with your partner, because they're going to be received in very different ways. So move forwards and communicate from a place of desire versus from a place of frustration or negativity, because it's not, you're going to be met with defensiveness. You're not going to get the outcome that you're ultimately trying to create. So just be aware of that as well.
Of things that you're interested in and see if there's any common interest there. And for folks who maybe are very different than their partner and you don't have a lot of common interests, of both of you creating a date night where you're introducing the other to an interest or a hobby that you have. So if one of your partners is really into golf, but you're into pottery or mall walking, I don't know, something random. Creating an evening or an afternoon where you are introducing your partner to that thing that
Mm.
you love and that you enjoy or you're curious about, and teaching them what you know about it.
Mm, love that. And that's a great thing that also can be done is taking it in turns. Maybe you have date night every Friday. Suggest to your partner, hey, next Friday, I'm going to plan a date night for us. I'm going to choose everything. I'm just going to tell you where to go, what to wear, and so on. Because the best way of telling our partner or sharing a desire is to show them what it is that you're desiring. You could create a Google Calendar, add in the notes in there, whatever it is that you're desiring for them to do, show them, let them experience it, and then be like, let's do this maybe once a month or once every however long works for you. And then they get to plan something that they think that you would really love. So that's that one. Let us know what you come up with. We would love to hear. Next up, we have number 3 is communication. You want to kick it off?
Yeah, communication. I think I forget who says this quote, and I'm not sure its origins, but communication is lubrication. Have you ever heard that stuff?
No, but it's facts.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
So communication in terms of everyday life stuff, but then that leads into communication within the bedroom and
Mm,
communication within dirty talk and communication within the juicy stuff. So if you can communicate well in your partnership and open up the dialogue to create more opportunities to share what's true for both of you or all of you, then you create more opportunities to have juiciness and lubrication in the relationship. So, yeah, working on that communication is going to really strengthen not only the connection that you have outside the bedroom, but inside as well. And they go hand in hand.
absolutely. So, most of us are really shit at communicating if we are honest. It's probably one of the biggest things that I work with women is how to communicate. And when it comes to communication, it's really important that you actually know what you want first and that you can articulate what your desire is and what you're wanting to say. And this is honestly why having friends that you can have these open conversations with who are that really supportive and empowering space and can hold that space for you is really important. This is why things like coaching containers or having a therapist are great. So you get to verbalize and put words to how you're feeling. That would be what I would recommend before trying to voice these things to your partner. Maybe that's getting a journal and writing these things out. Because if you don't know how you feel and what you desire, it's really hard to communicate that to somebody else. Don't expect your partner to be a mind reader and to figure out what you want if you yourself don't know what you want. That's a slightly unfair expectation to put on another person.
I used to do that pattern all the time in previous relationships where
Oh,
I would be
yeah.
so frustrated and I would be agitated with what was happening, but then I wouldn't have any clarity on how to move forward or what I wanted or what would be helpful.
Mm,
And that's not fair to your partner at all. And when
mm,
you then act from that, in my case, like bratty, entitled energy of just figure it out for me, just do it for me, just make it better for me. That's not fair.
mm,
And that's not the loving thing to do. So, really taking ownership over how you feel, working on communication with your friends, with people who you feel really comfortable and close with is going to be supportive. And if you don't have that system in place, then working with a coach or working with a therapist or working with someone who can help you identify emotions is really helpful
mm,
because it really was that for me was being honest with the sisters, the women in my life, and having them reflect back to me ways that I could articulate things better or be honest with myself or really challenge me. Like Steph, I love Steph and I's dynamic because oftentimes she'll be like, "Are you sure that's like you're laughing but you're crying?" Like just I have the defense mechanism of smiling and giggling through something that I'm just incredibly uncomfortable. And my closest girlfriends in my life will be like, "Okay, but that we don't have to laugh about that. That is really tender, and I can see where their tears want to come through, and just the permission from people who do love you and do care for you and want to hold space for you, then allows you to dip into that. So yeah, use the people in use the people in your networks. That doesn't sound the best, but
Tap
tapping
in.
into your
Yeah.
support system to learn more about yourself is going to be so supportive to then really create a beautiful partnership with smooth
Mm.
communication. And you can do that too with your partner, right? It just might be a little rocky, especially if you've had patterns of not being so honest and not being so transparent and that communication not flowing very easily. It might be a little bit clunky at first to get it going, but that's not to say that you can't do it
Mm.
within the partnership. You just need some tools.
100%. Exactly. It all comes down to the tools that you have. And something I hear a lot from humans is I know what I don't want, but I don't know what I want. And sure, that's a great place to start. But also, it's not that helpful when it comes to relationships to tell your partner, don't do this, doesn't give them any direction. When it comes to relationships, humans in general, if you're telling your partner, I hate it when you do, that's not helpful or nice. And it's probably going to be a little bit upsetting to receive that. If you're like, hey, I absolutely love it when you take out the trash. It means so much to me that I don't have to think about it and to just be able to trust that it's done. Don't say that in a passive aggressive way if that's not true, but you get the point. Often we go to nitpicking and saying what we don't want. And it's same thing when it comes to our bodies and it comes to sex. It can be like, I know I don't want missionary every morning in the same position, in the same way, ending the same way, same amount of time. That can sometimes be what women say. So it's like, so what do you want? If no limits existed, what would be your ideal scenario? Start to allow yourself to fantasize and to dream and to desire to get clear on what you want without the mind coming in saying that's not possible for me and for this dynamic, because sometimes we limit ourselves. The mind is so limiting because we're already saying it's not possible because of X, Y, and Z. And that's completely untrue. You can change anything if you have the right tools and you have the right approach and you have patience as well. And your partner is willing, many ingredients required, but absolutely you can create huge transformation. So get clear on the things that you want. And we do have a practice that we're going to share with you. Also, just know that getting communication on point outside of the bedroom is so fucking necessary so that you can get communication right in the bedroom. If you can't have an open conversation with your partner about how you're feeling and what your desires and wanting to bring newness into the relationship and trying different things for a date night and trying activities together, the things we've talked about, if you find that challenging in your relationship, don't expect yourself to go into the bedroom and be able to tell your partner, hey, babe, I know you've been rubbing my clit like this for the last 4 years, but actually, I would like something else. That's a pretty impossible task. Don't have those expectations. It starts outside of the bedroom.
I just wanted to challenge that thought just a little bit. If we backtrack to not saying what you don't want, I think saying what you don't want can be helpful sometimes. And I think that it's about creating clarity around what's working and what's not in the relationship. And I think sometimes saying that you don't want something, so say you're talking about what's for dinner and your partner suggests pizza and you don't
Mm,
want pizza, like that doesn't sound good to your stomach. You're like, I just had pizza 3 nights ago. You don't want that. Share that, but that you don't have clarity on what you want instead, but that you'll spend some time thinking about it.
yes.
So creating that containment of, okay, I know that I don't want to have the same type of sex again tomorrow morning, but let me gain the clarity or let me think on it and I'll let you know when I have
Mm-hmm.
the answer or more to share with you, right? Like that percolation there can be the magic in sharing that's still in the works, it's still coming together, but there's clear communication there on what isn't working so
Mm.
that right away the partner has that awareness, right? To me, I don't always know what's the next step forward is going to be, but I have clarity on what needs to stop. And I think that creates a border for your partner to be like, okay, we're working within
Yes.
this zone. I just wanted to add that little piece to it because that's clear communication in itself, right? I'm
Yes.
not all the way there yet. I'm a little bit there and I've got one piece of the puzzle. I'll keep you posted on as the story progresses. Keep the
Mhm.
updates live.
Yeah, I think context is really important when it comes to that, and also communication of how you deliver it. What I don't want people doing is going to their partner and saying, "I don't want you to fuck me in missionary tomorrow," because that approach wouldn't be helpful. So, because I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that is a really beautiful way to approach it. Do you have an example from your partnership of something maybe in the last like month or so, or last
Mhm.
couple of months, that you have known you want to change? Like, how did you approach that? If you're able to share a little.
Yeah, I had an incident recently. I was at a wedding and I have a very complicated relationship with drinking, which maybe
Mhm.
we'll share in another podcast. But I don't drink. And to me, it's very overstimulating and triggering to be around people who are drinking in excess. And at weddings, that tends to be something that happens.
Mhm.
So I was at a wedding and there was a few things that I really hit my window of tolerance with, where I was like way outside of my ability to self-regulate and contain how I was feeling.
Mm.
And so I knew I needed to step away from the situation, and I know I needed like a quiet space to go, but I didn't know the next step of once I had a minute to myself of like how to go about the rest of the night.
Fair.
And my partner was saying like, "What do I do?" He wanted the clarity of what do I do and what do we do for this and this. And I knew the first step ahead that was like I need to take a second outside, breathe, collect myself, and I don't want to be talked to right now. I need just a little bit of containment of myself, and then we can talk about how we talk moving
Mhm.
forward, like the
Mhm.
next step. So I had clarity on right now, I just need to remove myself. Right now, I need alone time. Right now, I need to breathe. Right now, I need to have quiet.
Mm.
But I didn't know how to tell him to interact with me moving forward. So, yeah, that was like one thing that happened really recently where I just was clear of I'm overstimulated. I'm not okay at this very moment. So, give me a little bit of space, give me a little bit of breather, and then I'll come back to you to
Mhm.
say like what the next step were. And then that ended up being resolved in such a beautiful way, right? We created some space. We created a containment for what was happening, and then there was joy that moved in where
Mm.
more fun could happen, and we knew how to interact the rest of the night once I was able to settle myself down.
Mm.
So that's on nervous system regulation as well, which is like a whole other
Yes.
podcast, but a very like little example there of what it can mean to know one
Mm.
step in the plan, but maybe not the master plan.
Beautiful share and beautiful example. And I think that just clearly demonstrates your self awareness and emotional intelligence that in complete dysregulation, you were able to communicate in that way. Celebration for you, because most of us struggle with that, right? Of being able to, in dysregulation, communicate. It makes it much harder. And that's definitely again why context is important. Outside of your window of tolerance, if you're dysregulated, it makes it even more challenging to really communicate where you're at and what you need. So I really love the way that you shared that, because somebody like past version of Steph in that situation would have run away and not said anything, and then create this whole spiral of I need alone time, but I can't communicate that. So that's another perfect example of why when we practice this communication in simple context, it's so important so that you have that foundation of skill of communication and the tool to be able to share in those moments. Hey, this is what is going on and this is what I need in this moment. Like, beautiful share.
And don't get it twisted, I did kind of mess up twice before that final eventual transparency there of what was happening. Like I reverted first to an old pattern that I did with an ex-partner where it was high conflict. So that was
Mm.
like my first go-to where I was treating my current partner as if he was a past partner. And so I was giving him the cold shoulder and distance and like almost creating more tension to create a conflict. And then the second piece of it was like an icing out. So I tripped up
Yeah.
multiple times before I ended up there with clear communication of, okay, I know what I need.
Yeah.
And that's just the beauty in having humility for yourself.
Mm. I love that. We're all fucking human at the end of the day. And even when we've been practicing this for a long time, still sometimes, many times, we're going to make mistakes and revert back
Yeah.
to those old patterns and be challenged time and time again. And that's the nature of being human. So that's the way it goes. And we hop back on that train and we try again next
Yeah.
time. So yeah, compassion is really important. Do we want to share that practice now or at the end?
Yeah, I'm happy to now, and then we'll move into the last piece
Final?
that's a bit more, yeah, sex related.
All right. You want to?
Sorry, my chair is so squeaky.
Oh, squeaky, squeaky. Fairs loves desires.
Yeah, so this is a practice that we have learned through our Vita coaching methodology with Layla Martin. And I love this practice. I do it a lot in my work, I do it a lot with friends. And then I also do this with my partner in a contained practice. And what I think it is so beautiful about this communication practice is you set the containment for it to exist, right? Like you create almost a ritual or a playground for this practice. And both of you come into it knowing you're going to have a communication moment, like a communication exercise. And what's different than just going about your everyday and sitting down at the dinner table and bringing something up is maybe your partner isn't fully prepared or braced for a challenging conversation or for a quote unquote bomb to be dropped on them, right? If you're approaching your partner at the end of the day, you're sitting down, you're eating, and you're recapping your day, and you're like, oh, and by the way, I'm like hating the sex that we're having right now. And I really desire to have better sex and hotter sex with you tomorrow. They maybe not made me feel a little bit outside of their own what's the word for that? But they may feel
They
a
haven't
little caught off
consent,
guard.
right? There's not that
Yeah,
consent.
consent containment is really important. So the exercise creates this container for you to play in. Okay, so in this practice, what you're gonna do is you're gonna share your fears, what is maybe creating some discomfort in the relationship right now, what you're worried about, what's not working for you, what is heavy. Then you're gonna share what you're loving and what's working and what you wanna celebrate within the partnership. And then you're gonna say what you wanna call in. So what you're desiring, what you're excited about, what you wanna move towards, what's your goal. And having this framework is really beautiful because you're just both gonna come into the practice to agree to listen to one another until it feels complete. And then you're gonna get that chance to then share from your perspective what you are fearing, what you're loving, and what you're desiring. And a lot of the times in partnerships, we listen to respond and we don't listen to hear the other person and to really take in what they're saying. We listen just to have a rebuttal or to say something back. So in this practice, you're creating the space to actually do that. So, Steph, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. When I give clients this practice to do to begin, and even with self, sometimes I actually do it just from a general sense to begin of what do you fear in general? What are you loving right now in life? And then what do you desire? And that can be a gentle way to dive into it first and then move into a relationship edition. It depends what feels right for you because if this kind of practice is new to you, this might feel really scary to be bringing up to share with your partner. And also, you don't know what's going to come up. Like, how often do you sit with the person that you get the most intimate with, you're in this relationship with, and share your fears and your desires? Oftentimes, we think we know somebody really well, and it can be quite shocking to hear, wow, you have this deep fear that I never knew about, or you have this desire that I had no idea was a desire. And sometimes feelings can come up around that. So have that awareness, and the containment is really important. I recommend in these sorts of things setting a timer. So you could set a timer for a minute or 2 minutes and create that space. So that helps to guide you as to how long you have. So maybe it's we set the timer for 3 minutes. The first person shares their fears, their loves, desires, and they continue in that space. And then maybe you sit in silence if that 3 minutes, if you have more time, and just witness each other, just be in each other's space, and then switch partners after that and have that 3 minutes. You might find one word answers come out. You might find you rip off that band aid and just words keep flowing out and you don't know where this has come from. It's impossible to predict what's going to arise for you, but create that container can be really helpful versus rushing through as fast as possible, immediately switching and not giving yourself or your partner the chance to really be in the discomfort and be in the space. And that is really the magic where you allow things to truly arise and come through.
Mhm. And scheduling this in a space where both of you are rested, both of you are as regulated as you can be, and you have the privacy and the spaciousness to have this. Don't set it up to do this practice right before going to a dinner meeting with your boss at the end of a busy work week. Really pick this in an intentional way and finding the spaciousness to be able to do this that honors both partners. And I will say with the timer, like giving yourself a little bit more time than you think you need because maybe you've seen this in a journal practice, but when you start journaling, you're like, "Oh, I didn't even know that was there." You start automatic writing and you're, "Oh, okay, these are like the emotions underneath those emotions,"
Mm.
and more flows. So in this practice as well, giving yourself just a little bit more in that timer, because what maybe is the beginning fear that you start with that's topical that you feel like, okay, this is clear, I can identify it. Maybe there's some little extras down deep below there that you're not quite fully aware of yet that are going to arise if you give yourself the spaciousness to talk it through.
Absolutely. Give
Yeah.
yourself that space. 10-minute timer, each person, go for it. 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever feels good to you to dive into it. All
Yeah.
right. Number four, fourth and final, bring newness. So now, in spicing things up in a long-term relationship and getting out of that roommate phase, now is the time where we're really talking about sex and talking about the bedroom. And hopefully you can see that good sex is started outside of the bedroom. And there are so many other ingredients that are, in fact, probably more important than the actual sex itself, because those laid the foundation for this phase. So bringing newness into the bedroom and mixing it up.
A lot of women that I work with, and I'm sure Steph agrees with this as well, but people are just having boring sex, like doing the same thing. And especially when you're in a long term relationship, maybe it's like satisfying and maybe you're both getting off and maybe you're enjoying orgasms easily, but you're doing like A, B, C every time the same way. Like when you know your partner, you know what works for them, maybe you just stick to a blueprint that always works. And that can feel monotonous, that can feel boring, even if it is pleasurable, even if you are having orgasms and having a good time. Switching it up to some degree, right? Bringing in some flavor of newness, of novelty, of different vibe that's going to re energize that dynamic for you and yourself. A lot of the women I work with are like, yeah, we have sex pretty much the same way every time we initiate this way, we go into this, then we move to that, and we're done.
Mm.
And for this uh, conversation today, we want to invite you into what do you want to add in? What do you want to incorporate? What do you want to try that's new? Where do you want to switch things up to offer that newness into the
Mhm.
experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be having a conversation like, "Hey, babe, how do you feel about us bringing in a new toy to try?" And I think that can be helpful sometimes to bring something in externally to bring that newness to start. Or maybe you see it, look online on Instagram, send them something, send them like, "Here's this thing. Ooh, would you be open to trying this?" There's many ways that you can do this, or you can just buy something if that feels good. You could, if there's something you desire, you could just bring it in and say, when do you feel like using this? Maybe that's a new position that you want to try. I would recommend a fun activity is to create a sex bucket list. So have a think about what are the positions that we haven't done together. Maybe there were times when you first were dating and getting it on that were really hot and spicy. And you can say, hey, do you remember that time that we did this? How do you feel about trying that again or bringing that in? There's fun, playful ways that you can do this to bring newness into the bedroom. New toys, new temperatures, new textures, new lubes, new rooms, new lingerie, new characters. You could role play. There's so many different things that you can do. So having a sex bucket list can be super fun for you to explore new things, different things to start to really spice it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something else that can be really powerful is when you are in a phase of wanting to change something in the sexual dynamic in the relationship, it can actually be good to take sex, penetrative sex off the table. So this is something I recommend to clients all the time is have a conversation with your partner and say, "Hey, how do you feel about us trying out, let's not have sex for the next 30 days and let's focus on other things instead." And that timeline, you can make it whatever feels good for you and your partner. Maybe for you, it's 7 days, maybe it's 60 days. Doesn't matter. It has to feel good to you. But then you can start to explore kissing more, foreplay, making out, holding hands, touching each other, sensual massage,
Hand
using,
jobs, blow
there we
jobs,
go.
69, mutual masturbation, watching porn together, audio porn together.
Keep going, keep going, Jenna. What else you got?
Yeah, I think, one of the I really like to recommend that, especially when there's performance any issues with performance in the relationship, or if there is pain with vaginal penetration, to do things external. If you have endometriosis and vaginal penetration is really painful, bringing it back, like, sex is off the table, right? If you have any issues with erectile dysfunction in your relationship, being like, okay, we're not going to have penetrative sex. Like, what else can we do here to play with it, to bring this erotic fun and this erotic energy to here without the pressure of having to have this penis vagina sex where
Mhm.
it ends in an orgasm and everyone's happy and whatever. Sometimes when there's too much pressure on that, it can create some discomfort or some
Mm.
disease. So taking it off the table, I love that suggestion. It is
Yeah.
honestly very powerful, and don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate how fun it is to go back to making out and doing hand jobs.
Yeah. Honestly, like P and V is one tiny look, it's amazing. It really is. It's great. Maybe not for you. Maybe you don't agree. And that's okay. That's totally okay. There is so much more to explore. And this is something that a lot of couples, especially if you're getting into that roommate phase, start kissing your partner again. Start making out. Let's have at least a 10-second kiss multiple times a day. Let's try for that. Let's have long extended hugs. Lots of people can get into that habit of little peck goodbye, little peck hello, and that's about it. Little hug goodbye, hug hello. But really, are you snuggling? Are you touching? Are you caressing? Are you stroking? Are you making out? Are you sucking them? Are you doing all of these things? Bring that back in with the knowing that isn't going to lead to sex can be so powerful because for a lot of women, they don't want to do those things because they fear it leading into sex. And if the sex is mediocre and isn't truly filling them up, then they avoid all of that. So that can also be another powerful reason to take sex off the table and say, let's just focus on these other things and let's agree that it's not going to lead to sex. And foreplay, that's so sexy, that desire, that sexual energy that's going to be building up, that tension that's going to build up between you two. Oof, that's going to be super juicy.
Especially in heterosexual couples, we just get into these pigeonholes where we're only doing penetrative sex.
Mm,
But let's take from the queer community and let's talk about all the other ways that we can have fun with our bodies and reignite that
yeah.
excitement by trying something new. And it doesn't have to be so straightforward. And yeah, open mouth kissing your
Oh,
partner is
stop.
so delicious and so fun. And when you feel like you don't have to perform right after, you don't have to get somewhere, there's nowhere place to arrive. You don't have to be a certain way. You can enjoy the turn on of just kissing. That is men. If you are a man overhearing this right now, or if you are just clicked onto this by the grace of God, please just tell your gal that she doesn't need to do anything. This is exactly where we are. I just want to enjoy kissing you. Allow that door to close where you're like, we're not having sex tonight, my love. Let's just enjoy this moment. I just want to kiss you
Oh,
and truly mean it. I feel like
that
10
was a
out
bit
of
of a
10.
turn on, Jenna.
Yeah, a lot of people would just melt at that
Yeah.
type. Yeah, that permission to just take our time to enjoy the moment. How much that can just relax our system would be
Mm,
like, don't underestimate. Very
don't underestimate it. Now I want to kiss someone. Nobody to kiss right now. Anyway, maybe you're hearing this and thinking, "Ugh, I don't even feel kissing my partner that much." This is also normal. I've heard this all the time. And you can totally change the way that you kiss. And there's many different types of kissing that are applicable for different situations. So we will at some point do a whole episode and have a conversation around kissing because there's different types and people have different kissing styles and maybe you have a different kissing style to your partner and you can teach your partner and vice versa for the different types. You can even give different types of kisses different names based on what you want. So we'll get into that. If that's something that you want, let us know and we can make that happen sooner.
I
All right.
feel so good about adding some more spice to people's lives. That was so corny. Cut that.
Right.
This was fun. Didn't you have fun?
I feel like I'm ready for a partner to get into this spicy phase forever. I don't want the roommate phase. I just want a partner. I'm just now getting a little bit turned on by this whole conversation, and I wish I had somebody to go and do these practices with. But I'm gonna go number one, pull back into self after this conversation. That's the phase that I'm going to be in. And yeah, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, reach out. Let us know any follow up episodes that you might want because there's a lot that we talk about, and each thing that we say could then be its own entire episode because it's just know that this whole thing is so fucking complicated. Humans are complicated. Sex, intimacy, two people coming into a dynamic with each other and gonna live together and spend their lives together. In what world is that going to be simple? It's
Yeah.
not.
Let's reframe the word complicated into complex or intricate because I think relationships are such a beautiful framework or landscape to learn more about ourselves. And yes, it can feel a bit heady at times of like, how do we solve all of these pieces? But really, like that's the cosmic joke is we have these people who are in front of us that are mirrors and to learn more about ourselves and are going to show us the parts of ourselves that we need to explore.
Mm.
And I think if you think about relationships as like these things that you'll never master or that'll always feel hard or dense or intense or crunchy, then that's what's going to circulate around you. But if you think about them as this fruitful garden to explore more of who you are and meet more edges of yourself, then it gets to be that as well. So,
Mm.
yeah, a little reframe because I think that's helpful.
It's just like a puzzle, really. And if you've got all the right pieces for a puzzle, then it can be pretty fun and satisfying and challenging, yet quite a thrill when you
Mhm.
get the pieces of the puzzle and put them together. If you have some puzzle pieces missing, it can feel a little bit frustrating. And what we're here to do is to help you pick up some of those puzzle pieces and have the tools. And it really is about having the education and the tools and developing that self awareness and having the skills to be able to bring that into partnership. And then it doesn't have to be this challenging thing.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
finding someone that you trust and that you wanna do the work with.
Yeah.
Someone you trust, you love, you have fun with,
100%.
that
That's
the
important.
hardships can don't feel that hard with, right? Yeah, it's relationships are work, and they're not the easiest thing that you'll ever do in this lifetime, but they're also the most
Mhm.
rewarding, and nothing in this life is handed to us without a little something to chew on, right? Like, a little grit.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I love
Okay.
it. Beautiful. All right, my loves.
Let us know what was the most helpful. Send us a DM, write either of us, send us an email, and let us know your takeaways. And if you love this episode and you've been loving Pleasure Playbook, then hit us up with a review. It really helps us grow and it really helps this channel get more reach. So send us your thoughts there. And that means the world to both Steph and I. Thank you for being here. We will see you next week for another playbook.
See you then.
Bye bye.